Nathan Carter, a powerful businessman consumed by ambition, has built an empire, but at a cost he's only beginning to realize. His children, Ethan and Lily, feel like strangers in their own home, craving the love and attention their father fails to give. Meanwhile, Laura, the quiet housekeeper with a mysterious connection to Nathan's past, holds secrets that could unravel everything he thought he knew. As betrayals surface, family bonds are tested, and long-buried truths come to light. Nathan is forced to confront the choices that brought him here. Can he mend the broken pieces of his life before it's too late? Be sure to hit that subscribe button and stay with us for more incredible stories. We'd love to know, where are you watching from in the world? Nathan Carter stood in the grand foyer of his sprawling estate, its cold marble floors echoing the sound of his polished shoes. He was a man accustomed to control of his empire, his life, and the people around him. As he pored over investment charts in his office, the faint laughter of his children, Ethan and Lily, filtered in from the garden. Nathan barely noticed. His focus was elsewhere as always. Laura Hayes, the family's long-serving housekeeper, carried a tray of coffee into the office. Her presence was as unobtrusive as ever. "Your coffee, sir," she said softly. Nathan waved her off without looking up, but Laura lingered for a moment, her eyes flitting to a photo on Nathan's desk. It was old, slightly faded, showing a younger Nathan with an unfamiliar woman. Laura's hand tightened around the tray, but she said nothing and slipped out of the room. Upstairs, Ethan, age 9, and Lily, age 6, were deep in their usual game of pretend. "I'm the astronaut, and you're the mission control," Ethan declared. But beneath their playful banter, the children carried a quiet sadness, the kind born from a father who was rarely present. Later that evening, as Laura tucked them into bed, Ethan asked, "Why doesn't Dad care about us?" Laura froze, struggling to find an answer. "He cares in his own way," she said gently. But her voice faltered, betraying the truth. Meanwhile, Nathan was locked in a heated video call with his business partners, Daniel and Marcus. Talks of an expansion project were underway. Nathan was relentless, pushing for profits at any cost. "What about the environmental protests?" Marcus asked. "The locals are angry." Nathan's response was swift and cold. "I don't care about a few angry voices. They'll fall in line." Unbeknownst to Nathan, Ethan had overheard the conversation while sneaking into the office for a book. He didn't understand all the details, but knew enough to realize something was wrong. The next morning, as the family's routine began, Nathan noticed Laura glancing at him differently. Her usual deference seemed tinged with something else, pain perhaps, or recognition. Nathan dismissed it, but the unease lingered. Hours later, as Laura scrubbed the kitchen counters, Daniel appeared at the back door. "I need a word," he said quietly. He leaned closer, his voice low. "Nathan trusts you, but I don't. Watch yourself, Laura." As Daniel left, Laura's composure cracked. She stared at the photo she'd hidden in her apron pocket, the same one from Nathan's desk. "If he ever remembers," she whispered, "it'll change everything." But Nathan Carter was a man who never looked back. And yet, the shadows of the past were beginning to stir, threatening the carefully constructed life he had built. Nathan Carter couldn't shake the feeling of unease as he sat in his office the next morning. Laura's lingering glances, Daniel's unusual tension during their last meeting, everything seemed slightly off, though Nathan prided himself on maintaining control. He dismissed the thoughts as distractions, burying himself in emails about the upcoming expansion project. Downstairs, Laura moved methodically through her tasks, but her mind was racing. She knew she couldn't keep the secret much longer, not with Ethan and Lily growing more curious by the day. She glanced at the photo tucked inside her apron. How much does he even remember? Ethan and Lily, meanwhile, were piecing together their own mystery. After overhearing his father's conversation, Ethan couldn't let it go. "We need to find out what Dad's hiding," he whispered to Lily as they crouched in the garden. They had discovered an old shed behind the tall hedges, locked tight. Maybe the answers are in there, Lily suggested, her big eyes wide with excitement. Back in the kitchen, Laura's thoughts were interrupted by Daniel's sudden return. He leaned against the doorway, his eyes scanning her sharply. "You didn't tell him anything, did you?" "No," Laura replied firmly, though her hands betrayed her nervousness. "Good," Daniel said, stepping closer. "Nathan doesn't need distractions right now. And neither do you." Laura held her ground, refusing to let him intimidate her. "Whatever you're worried about, Daniel, you should be more concerned about your own actions. Secrets have a way of coming out." Nathan entered just as Daniel left, their paths crossing briefly. Nathan noticed the stiffness between them but said nothing. Instead, he turned to Laura. "Is everything running smoothly?" he asked curtly. "Yes, sir," Laura replied, but her eyes briefly flickered to the desk, where a stack of papers related to the expansion project lay. Nathan caught the look. "Do you have something to say?" he pressed. Laura hesitated before shaking her head. "No, sir." Nathan wasn't convinced. He decided to check the shed that evening, suspecting it might be where Daniel had been keeping files Nathan hadn't authorized. As night fell, Nathan made his way to the garden. He wasn't the only one. Ethan and Lily, armed with a flashlight, had the same idea. Inside the shed, Nathan found not files, but an old, dusty box. It contained photos, letters, and trinkets, a time capsule of sorts. As he sifted through them, the faint light of a flashlight shone through the cracks in the wooden door. "Who's there?" Nathan demanded, throwing the door open. Ethan and Lily froze, caught red-handed. "We were just exploring," Ethan stammered. Nathan's anger flared, but something in Ethan's expression stopped him. He knelt down to their level. "Why were you in here?" "We thought you were hiding something," Ethan admitted. Nathan sighed, unsure how to respond. "This isn't about you," he said, standing abruptly. "Go back to the house." But Ethan's sharp gaze lingered on the box. "If it's not about us, then why do you look so upset?" Nathan said nothing, closing the box with a snap and carrying it inside. Ethan and Lily exchanged a look, their curiosity only deepening. As Nathan placed the box on his desk, Laura passed by, her face paling as she saw the familiar trinkets. "Where did you get that?" she asked, her voice trembling. Nathan frowned. "Why do you care?" I need to tell you something," Laura said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's about the past." Nathan's eyes narrowed, his grip tightening on the box. "What past?" Laura hesitated, knowing this was a point of no return. "Yours. And mine." Nathan's eyes remained locked on Laura, his jaw tightening as the weight of her words settled over the room. "What do you mean, my past and yours? What are you trying to say?" Laura hesitated, her gaze flickering to the box on his desk. She knew once she opened this door, there would be no going back. Finally, she took a deep breath. "That box contains pieces of a life you've forgotten, Nathan. A life that connects us in ways you can't imagine." Nathan's patience snapped. "Enough riddles. If you know something, just say it." Laura reached for the box, her hands trembling slightly as she opened it. She pulled out a photograph, a younger Nathan standing beside a woman with strikingly familiar features. She handed it to him. "Do you recognize her?" Laura asked softly. Nathan stared at the image, a strange sense of déjà vu washing over him. The woman's face was familiar, but the memory was blurred, like a dream he couldn't fully grasp. "That's Amelia," he said finally, his voice uncertain. Laura nodded, her own voice laced with emotion. "Yes, Amelia was my mother." Nathan's head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock. "Your mother? That's not possible." "Amelia and I," his words faltered as fragments of old memories surged to the surface. "You and my mother were close," Laura continued, her tone steady despite the storm raging inside her. "Before she left, she told me stories about you. Stories I didn't understand until I came to work here. When I saw you again, I realized who you were. Nathan sank into his chair, the weight of her revelation pressing down on him. He struggled to reconcile the Laura he knew, the quiet, diligent housekeeper, with the daughter of a woman he had once cared for deeply. I don't understand, he muttered. Why didn't you tell me this before? Laura hesitated. Because I didn't know how, and because I wasn't sure you'd care. Nathan flinched at her words, but he couldn't deny their truth. He had spent so long shutting out anything that wasn't directly tied to his business, including memories of Amelia. Before Nathan could respond, the door creaked open, and Ethan stepped inside cautiously. Dad? What's going on? Nathan stiffened, quickly closing the box. Nothing you need to worry about. Go back to your room. Ethan frowned, his eyes darting between his father and Laura. It doesn't look like nothing, he said, his voice firmer than Nathan expected. Nathan's temper flared, but Laura intervened. Ethan, it's okay, she said gently. Your dad and I are just talking. Ethan hesitated, but eventually left, leaving an uneasy silence in his wake. Nathan turned back to Laura, his expression unreadable. What else haven't you told me? Laura met his gaze, her resolve hardening. That's not the only secret in this house. Daniel knows something too. And if you don't start asking the right questions, you're going to lose more than you realize. Nathan leaned back in his chair, the photograph still clutched in his hand. The walls of his carefully constructed life were beginning to crack, and for the first time, he wasn't sure he could stop them from collapsing entirely. Nathan spent the night pacing his office, the photograph of Amelia resting on the desk like a silent accusation. Laura's revelation unsettled him, but her parting words lingered in his mind. Daniel knows something too. At dawn, he decided he couldn't wait any longer. He needed answers. Daniel. Nathan barked into his phone as soon as his partner picked up. Come to my office immediately. We need to talk. An hour later, Daniel arrived, his usual calm demeanor firmly in place. What's so urgent, Nathan? He asked, dropping into a chair. Nathan wasted no time. What do you know about Amelia Hayes? Daniel froze for a split second before recovering. Amelia Hayes? That's a name I haven't heard in years. Why are you bringing her up now? Don't play coy with me, Nathan said, his tone sharp. Laura, her daughter, is working here. She says you know something about the past. Start talking. Daniel leaned back, a smirk playing at the corner of his lips. So? She finally told you. I wondered how long it would take. Nathan's fists clenched. Enough games. What are you hiding? Daniel sighed, his expression hardening. Fine. If you want the truth, here it is. Amelia didn't leave you because she wanted to. She left because I made her. Nathan stared at him, stunned. What? Amelia was a distraction, Daniel continued coldly. You were on the brink of building your empire, and she was holding you back. So, I convinced her that leaving was the best thing for you. Nathan's voice shook with rage. You had no right to interfere in my life. I had every right, Daniel shot back. You were too blind to see it, but Amelia would have ruined everything you've built. I did what was necessary. Nathan surged to his feet, his fury barely contained. She was more than just a distraction. She was someone I cared about. And you stole that from me. Daniel's smirk returned. Maybe I did, but look at where you are now. You've got wealth, power, everything you ever wanted. Nathan's mind raced. Daniel's betrayal wasn't just personal. It was deeply intertwined with his entire life's trajectory. He realized that if Daniel could manipulate him then, he might still be doing so now. Is this why you're so interested in the expansion project? Nathan demanded, his voice low but dangerous. What are you hiding from me? Daniel's expression darkened. I don't have to answer that. Nathan stepped closer, his voice like steel. You will answer, or I'll make sure your stake in this company is worthless. For a moment, Daniel seemed to weigh his options. Then he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Fine. You want the truth? That land we're expanding on? It's contaminated. Toxic. The protests aren't just noise, they're backed by evidence. Nathan's stomach churned. You knew this and kept it from me? Daniel shrugged. We bury the evidence, smooth it over with some PR, and keep moving. That's how this business works. Nathan staggered back, the weight of Daniel's betrayal crashing down on him. Not only had his partner meddled in his personal life, but he had also jeopardized the very integrity of their business. As Daniel rose to leave, he offered one last cutting remark. Be careful where you dig, Nathan. You might not like what you find. Alone in his office, Nathan felt the full force of his partner's duplicity. But more than that, he realized how deeply his neglect of the people closest to him, Laura, Ethan, and Lily, had made him vulnerable to Daniel's machinations. He picked up the photograph of Amelia and stared at it for a long time. I can't let this continue, he thought. It's time to fight back. Nathan spent the night grappling with the weight of Daniel's revelations. His trusted partner had not only betrayed him, but also built their empire on a foundation of lies and deceit. Nathan knew that to reclaim control, he would have to face the truth he had ignored for so long. That meant starting with Laura. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, Nathan knocked on Laura's door. She opened it cautiously, her face etched with worry. Can we talk? Nathan asked, his voice softer than usual. Laura nodded, stepping aside to let him in. The room was modest, a stark contrast to the grandeur of the mansion. A small photo of her late mother, Amelia, rested on a bedside table. Nathan gestured to the photo. Tell me about her. About Amelia. Laura sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. My mother was strong, kind, and loved deeply, she began. She talked about you often, even after she left. She said you had the potential to be someone extraordinary, but the world you were building didn't have room for her. Nathan winced, guilt creeping into his expression. I never wanted her to leave. I didn't know, he trailed off, his voice thick with regret. Laura looked at him, her eyes piercing. You didn't know because you never asked. You were so focused on your ambitions that you didn't see the cost to the people who cared about you. Her words struck Nathan like a blow, but he nodded slowly. You're right. And now I see how blind I've been, not just to her, but to you, to Ethan and Lily. Laura softened slightly. It's not too late to change, Nathan. But you have to be willing to let go of the control you're so desperate to hold onto. Nathan hesitated, then asked the question that had been gnawing at him since Daniel's confession. Did you know about Daniel's role in Amelia leaving? Laura's expression darkened. I suspected, but I never had proof. When I came to work here and realized who you were, I stayed to protect Ethan and Lily from the same kind of neglect my mother faced. Nathan's chest tightened. And I let it happen anyway, he admitted, his voice heavy with shame. You can do better, Laura said firmly. But first you need to deal with Daniel. He's not just a threat to your business, he's a threat to your family. Nathan's jaw set with determination. I will, but I need your help. Laura tilted her head, surprised. My help? You've seen things I haven't, Nathan explained. You've been closer to Ethan and Lily than I ever was. I can't fix this alone. Laura studied him for a moment before nodding. If you're serious about changing, I'll help. But only if you're willing to fight for what matters: your children, your integrity, and the truth. Nathan extended his hand. Deal. Laura shook it, her grip steady. Then let's start by confronting Daniel. If we're going to take him down, we need to know everything he's hiding. Together, they began to form a plan. Laura would reach out to trusted contacts, while Nathan would dig through their company's records for evidence of Daniel's wrongdoings. As they worked late into the night, a tentative understanding formed between them. Nathan wasn't just fighting for his business anymore, he was fighting for his family, and for a chance to rebuild the bridges he had burned. By the time they finished, Nathan had unearthed a shocking discovery. Daniel had siphoned money from their accounts to cover up the contamination scandal. Worse, he had used Nathan's name to sign off on key documents. Nathan clenched his fists. "This ends now," he said. Laura placed a hand on his arm, grounding him. "Then let's make sure he has nowhere to hide." Nathan sat at his desk. The evidence of Daniel's betrayal spread out before him. Bank statements, forged documents, and emails, all damning proof of the lengths Daniel had gone to protect himself at Nathan's expense. Laura stood nearby, her arms crossed as she studied Nathan's grim expression. "What's the plan?" she asked. Nathan glanced up, determination in his eyes. "We need to outmaneuver him. If we confront him directly, he'll bury us with lies or destroy the evidence. We have to make him expose himself." Laura nodded thoughtfully. "If you're right, Daniel will be watching you closely. He knows you suspect him. What if we use that against him?" Nathan leaned forward. "Go on. Set a trap," Laura suggested. "Make him believe he's won. Let him think you've given up, then corner him when he least expects it." Nathan considered her words, a slow smile forming. "That could work, but we'll need to be convincing and careful. If he gets wind of what we're doing, this could backfire." The next day, Nathan began implementing their plan. He called Daniel to a meeting, masking his anger with feigned exhaustion. "You were right," Nathan said, deliberately sounding defeated. "I've been overthinking this whole expansion. Let's just push forward. I trust you to handle the details." Daniel smirked, clearly pleased. "Good. It's about time you saw reason." As Daniel left the meeting, Laura slipped into Nathan's office. "How did it go?" she asked. "Better than I expected," Nathan said. "He bought it. Now we just need to make sure he takes the bait." The bait came in the form of a forged document that Nathan had Laura draft a mock agreement approving further contamination cover-ups, supposedly under Nathan's authority. The document was strategically left in plain sight during a subsequent meeting with Daniel. As Nathan predicted, Daniel seized the opportunity. That evening, surveillance cameras captured him sneaking into Nathan's office, taking the fake document and making several phone calls. "He's moving," Nathan said as he reviewed the footage with Laura. Laura nodded. "Now we just have to catch him in the act." The final phase of their plan took shape quickly. Nathan scheduled a board meeting where he publicly announced plans to revisit the expansion project's environmental impact. "Transparency is our priority," he declared, making a point to look directly at Daniel. Daniel's composure faltered for a split second, but he recovered quickly. "A bold move, Nathan. I hope you're ready for the fallout." The meeting adjourned, but Nathan had planted the seeds of doubt among the board members. Later that evening, he and Laura met with Marcus, the other partner. Marcus, who had grown suspicious of Daniel's behavior, agreed to help. With Marcus on their side, Nathan confronted Daniel in private the next day. "I know what you've been doing," Nathan said, throwing a folder of evidence onto the table. Daniel glanced at the papers, his expression tightening. "Careful, Nathan. False accusations can be dangerous." "Not as dangerous as the truth," Nathan shot back. "We have the documents, the emails, the footage. It's over, Daniel." Daniel's confidence wavered, but he tried to bluff his way out. "If you go public with this, you'll ruin the company. The board won't stand for it." Nathan stepped closer, his voice low and firm. "The board already knows. Marcus is on my side. You're done." For the first time, Daniel looked genuinely panicked. "You think you can just push me out? I built this company with you. And now I'm saving it from you," Nathan said coldly. As security escorted Daniel out of the building, Nathan felt a strange mix of triumph and exhaustion. The battle wasn't over, there were still consequences to face, and his family to mend, but for the first time, he felt like he was finally on the right path. Laura met him outside the office. "One step down," she said. Nathan nodded. "And a lot more to go, but I won't stop this time." The victory over Daniel left Nathan Carter with more questions than answers. Removing his partner had been a necessary step, but it exposed deeper cracks in the foundation of his empire and his life. The damage Daniel had caused wasn't just financial. The reputation of the company was on the line, and Nathan knew that redemption would demand more than just business strategy. It was late evening when Nathan returned home. Ethan and Lily were in the living room, quietly working on a puzzle together. They looked up as he entered, their expressions guarded. "Hey," Nathan said, attempting a smile. "Hi, Dad," Ethan replied cautiously, while Lily simply nodded and went back to the puzzle. Nathan's chest tightened. He had spent so much time fighting to reclaim his company that he had barely started mending his relationship with his children. He sat down beside them, determined to try. "Can I help?" he asked. Ethan looked skeptical, but slid over a piece of the puzzle. "Sure." For the next half hour, they worked together in relative silence, the occasional comment from Lily breaking the tension. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Later that night, as Nathan watched Ethan and Lily sleep, Laura found him in the hallway. "They need more than this," she said quietly. "I know," Nathan admitted. "But every time I try, it feels like I'm too late. Like I'll never be able to fix it." Laura's voice softened. "You're here now, Nathan. That's a start. But you need to show them that you're not just trying to patch things up. They need to feel like they're your priority." Nathan thought about her words as he returned to his office. The documents he had collected against Daniel sat on his desk, but he couldn't bring himself to focus on them. Instead, his eyes fell on the photo of Amelia that Laura had returned to him. He picked it up, his mind racing. Laura had mentioned that Amelia left to protect him. Was that the whole truth? And if Amelia had cared so deeply, why hadn't she tried to reach out? Unable to sleep, Nathan decided to dig deeper. He called Marcus, the only remaining partner he could trust. "I need your help," Nathan said. "With what?" Marcus asked, sounding wary. "Finding the full story about Amelia. I need to know what Daniel kept from me," Nathan replied. Marcus hesitated, but eventually agreed. "I'll see what I can find. But be careful, Nathan. This might stir up more than you're ready for." While Marcus worked on his end, Nathan focused on rebuilding his relationship with Ethan and Lily. He began joining them for breakfast, driving them to school, and sitting through their bedtime stories. One evening, Ethan approached him cautiously. "Are you really staying this time?" Nathan knelt to meet his son's gaze. "Yes, Ethan. I'm not going anywhere." Ethan didn't reply immediately, but he nodded and walked away, leaving Nathan with a flicker of hope. Days later, Marcus called. "I found something," he said, his tone serious. "It's about Amelia." Nathan's heart pounded. "What is it?" "She didn't just leave because Daniel pushed her. She was forced out by someone else connected to the company. Someone you trusted." The revelation hit Nathan like a blow. "Who?" Marcus hesitated. "It's someone you'll want to talk to in person. I've sent the details to your email." Nathan opened the email as soon as the call ended. The name he saw made his blood run cold. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a direct connection to his family. The cost of redemption, he realized, was far greater than he had anticipated. And the answers he sought were about to shatter everything he thought he knew. Nathan stared at the name on his screen, his heart pounding in disbelief. The email from Marcus revealed the person who had forced Amelia out wasn't just Daniel, it was his father, Richard Carter. Richard had built the foundation of the company Nathan now controlled. Revered as a shrewd and commanding businessman, his legacy loomed large over Nathan's every decision. But now it seemed that legacy was tainted. Nathan sat frozen for a moment before dialing Marcus. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" he demanded. "I double-checked the documents," Marcus replied. "Your father signed off on the payments used to force Amelia into silence. He didn't want her interfering with what he saw as your future." Nathan ended the call, his grip on the phone tightening. The realization sent a chill through him. Richard had manipulated not just his life, but also Amelia's, ensuring their paths diverged forever. Later that evening, Laura found Nathan sitting alone in the darkened study, his shoulders slumped. "Nathan," she said softly. He didn't look at her. "It was my father," he said, his voice low and hollow. Laura's breath hitched. "Richard?" Nathan nodded. "He's the reason Amelia left. He made her go, convinced she would ruin my future." Laura sank into the chair opposite him, processing the revelation. "That explains a lot," she murmured. "I don't know what to do," Nathan admitted. "My entire life I've been trying to live up to his expectations. And now I find out he destroyed the only real happiness I ever had." Laura hesitated before speaking. "Nathan, your father's choices don't have to define you. You have a chance to make things right with Ethan, Lily, and with me." Nathan looked at her, a flicker of determination returning to his eyes. "I need to confront him." "You should," Laura said. "But be prepared, Richard won't make this easy." The next morning, Nathan boarded a private plane to visit his father's estate. Richard Carter had retired years ago, retreating to a sprawling property far from the city. As Nathan approached the grand entrance, memories of his childhood flooded back: his father's booming voice, his stern lectures, the constant pressure to excel. Steeling himself, Nathan knocked on the heavy oak door. Richard, now in his late 70s, but still imposing, opened the door himself. "Nathan," he said, surprised. "What brings you here?" "We need to talk," Nathan said curtly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Richard led him to the study, pouring himself a glass of scotch as he settled into a leather armchair. "What's on your mind?" he asked, his tone casual. Nathan didn't mince words. "I know what you did to Amelia." Richard stiffened, his hand tightening around the glass. "I did what I had to do," he said evenly. "She was a distraction. You had a future to build. You had no right." Nathan shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. "She wasn't just a distraction, she was someone I cared about. You tore her away from me." Richard's gaze hardened. "And look where you are now. You're a success because I made the tough decisions you couldn't." Nathan shook his head, anger and disbelief coursing through him. "No. I succeeded in spite of you, not because of you, and I won't let your decisions dictate my life anymore." Richard's face darkened. "Be careful, Nathan. You're walking a fine line." "No, you are," Nathan countered. "Your actions didn't just hurt me, they hurt Laura, Ethan, and Lily. And I won't let your shadow hang over us any longer." For the first time, Richard looked unsettled. "You think you can just erase what I've built?" Nathan stood, his resolve unwavering. "I'm not erasing it. I'm rebuilding it the right way, without your interference." Without another word, Nathan turned and walked out of the study, leaving Richard alone with his scotch and his guilt. On the flight home, Nathan felt a strange mix of anger and relief. Confronting his father hadn't solved everything, but it was a step toward breaking free from the control that had defined his life. When he arrived home, Ethan and Lily were waiting for him in the living room. Laura stood behind them, her eyes searching his face. "Are you okay?" she asked. Nathan nodded. "I'm getting there, and I'm not stopping until this family has the future we deserve." Laura smiled faintly, sensing the shift in him. Nathan wasn't just confronting the past, he was finally ready to take control of his future. Nathan Carter awoke the next morning with a renewed sense of purpose. The confrontation with his father had been a turning point, but it wasn't enough. Words wouldn't repair the damage done to his family. Only actions could do that. As he stepped into the kitchen, Ethan and Lily were already seated at the breakfast table. Ethan glanced up, his expression guarded, while Lily offered a small smile. Laura stood at the counter, pouring coffee, her eyes silently encouraging Nathan to take the next step. "Good morning," Nathan said, his tone softer than usual. "Morning," Lily replied brightly. Ethan mumbled a quiet, "morning," but kept his focus on his cereal. Nathan hesitated, then sat down at the table. I was thinking, he began, that maybe we could spend the day together. Just the three of us. Ethan finally looked up, suspicion flickering in his eyes. Why? Don't you have work? Nathan shook his head. Not today. Today I'm all yours. Lily clapped her hands excitedly. Can we go to the park? And maybe get ice cream after? Nathan smiled. Anything you want. Ethan's gaze softened slightly, but he remained cautious. Okay, he said at last. The day was sunny and warm, perfect for an outing. At the park, Lily raced toward the swings while Ethan hung back, sitting on a bench beside Nathan. Dad, Ethan said after a long silence, why are you trying so hard now? Nathan turned to his son, choosing his words carefully. Because I realize now how much I've missed. I thought I was doing the right thing by focusing on work, but I was wrong. You and Lily are what matter most, and I want to make up for the time I've lost. Ethan studied his father's face, searching for any hint of insincerity. Finally, he nodded. You have a lot to make up for. I know, Nathan said, but I'm not going anywhere this time. They joined Lily on the playground, and for the first time in years, Nathan let himself relax. He pushed her on the swings, helped Ethan climb the monkey bars, and even chased them around during a game of tag. Later, they stopped for ice cream at a small parlor. Lily giggled as her cone dripped onto her hand, while Ethan finally began to open up, sharing stories about school and his dreams of becoming an astronaut. As the day wound down, Nathan tucked the kids into bed. Lily hugged him tightly, her voice muffled against his shirt. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, sweetheart, Nathan whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching. When Nathan turned to him, Ethan hesitated before stepping forward and giving his father a brief hug. Good night, Dad. Good night, Ethan, Nathan replied, his heart full. Later that night, Nathan found Laura in the kitchen. Thank you, he said simply. For what? She asked, turning to face him. For believing in me when I didn't deserve it. For taking care of Ethan and Lily when I didn't. Laura smiled softly. You're doing the right thing now. That's what matters. Nathan leaned against the counter, his expression contemplative. I want you to stay, Laura. Not just as someone who works here, but as part of this family. Ethan and Lily see you as more than a housekeeper, and honestly, so do I. Laura's eyes widened in surprise. Nathan, that's not a decision to take lightly. I know, he said, but I'm serious. I can't do this without you, and I don't want to. Laura didn't respond immediately, her gaze dropping to the floor as she processed his words. Finally, she looked up, her voice steady. If you're serious about building this family back up, then I'll stay. But you have to promise me something. Anything, Nathan said. Don't stop trying, Laura said firmly. They deserve your best every single day. Nathan nodded, a solemn vow in his eyes. I promise. Weeks had passed since Nathan Carter began his journey to rebuild his family, but this day felt different. The mansion, once cold and silent, now echoed with laughter and warmth. Ethan and Lily raced down the hall, giggling as they chased each other, while Laura stood in the kitchen, preparing a meal with an ease that spoke of a newfound comfort in her role. Nathan watched from the doorway, a small smile tugging at his lips. For the first time in years, his home felt alive. Dinner's ready, Laura called, setting plates on the table. Ethan and Lily scrambled to their seats, their excitement palpable. Nathan joined them, noticing how natural this had all begun to feel. As they ate, Lily chattered about her day at school, while Ethan shared a new book he was reading. Nathan listened intently, chiming in with questions and encouragement. You should come to my science fair next week, Ethan said suddenly, his tone casual but his eyes hopeful. I wouldn't miss it, Nathan replied without hesitation. Ethan nodded, a flicker of trust returning to his expression. Later that evening, as the children prepared for bed, Nathan found himself back in his office. The photograph, of Amelia still sat on his desk, a silent reminder of the past. He picked it up, studying her face. "I'm trying," he murmured. "For them, and for you." His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Laura stepped in, her expression warm. "They're asleep," she said. "Thank you," Nathan replied, setting the photo down. Laura lingered for a moment before speaking. "You've come a long way, Nathan. But there's still more to do." Nathan nodded. "I know. But I'm ready to do it. For Ethan, Lily, and this family." Laura smiled, but before she could respond, Lily's voice called from upstairs. "Laura, can you read us a bedtime story?" Laura hesitated, glancing at Nathan. He gave her a small nod. "Go. They need you." As Laura left, Nathan followed her to the children's room. He stood quietly in the doorway as Laura read to Ethan and Lily, her voice calm and soothing. The children snuggled close to her, their faces serene. Nathan's chest tightened with emotion. This was what he had fought for, a chance to create a home filled with love and connection. The next morning, Nathan made a bold decision. Over breakfast, he addressed his family. "I've decided to take a step back from work," he announced. Ethan and Lily exchanged surprised glances, while Laura raised an eyebrow. "I've spent too much time putting my career first," Nathan explained. "But from now on, my priority is here with all of you." Lily clapped her hands, beaming. "Does that mean more time at the park?" Nathan chuckled. "Absolutely." Ethan smiled, though he tried to hide it. "That's cool, I guess." Laura's eyes softened, pride shining in them. As the day unfolded, Nathan followed through on his promise, spending the afternoon building a treehouse with Ethan and Lily. Despite his lack of construction skills, the project was filled with laughter and teamwork. By evening, the treehouse stood proudly in the yard, decorated with string lights and colorful handprints from the children. As they admired their work, Nathan felt a deep sense of fulfillment. "This is just the beginning," he said, wrapping an arm around Ethan and Lily. Laura joined them, standing nearby with a quiet smile. For the first time, Nathan felt like his family was truly complete. As the lights of the treehouse twinkled against the night sky, Nathan knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. But for the first time, he wasn't afraid. He was ready to face the challenges together with the people who mattered most. As the Carter family begins their new chapter, we're reminded that love, trust, and redemption can heal even the deepest wounds. It's never too late to fight for what truly matters. If you enjoyed this heartfelt journey, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story. Subscribe now and join our growing community of story lovers.